Thank you very much. And I am honored really to be contributing to this conference. And, I've been using a lot of the utilities that you guys sponsor, like with scanning my bash code and so forth. I just want to mention that I did see before this some recordings from the DevX conference 2021, and and I really found it very enlightening on there. But I especially was interested in this developer experience, getting the job done, collaborating in a joyful way. So, I'm glad to see, some emotion coming out of this whole idea because, we do want to declutter and feel that we're doing everything that we can. And that's what I wanted to talk about today in this how to onboard people in a single day. Now, I got caught with this because I actually put that on my resume on my LinkedIn. And so when she goes, "Well, I'd be interested to see how you really do that." And it turns out really it's really more it is more than a day, but it can be done if we do enough preparation. And that's really the message that I have. But the most difficulty that I had in getting this onboarding is convincing people of how important this whole objective is. And when I started saying, okay, can we get somebody in one day so that way the next day they're productive, they're actually going on pair programming and people are not going to be making fun of them. And so, and that was really and people didn't believe it. But when I finally was able to achieve this over several months, it was, people realized the importance of where that is. And I got a lot of congratulations on that situation because it really has impacted the culture of the organization. So this is what I mean. On this how does this make you feel is really a key aspect of the triggers that we have in working with a company. When you first join a company, it's kind of an emotional scary thing, so we want people to feel good on it. And so unfortunately, if we get a bungled onboarding experience, it triggers all kinds of negative emotions from our past. And I'll talk about a little bit about that. That is really not productive, and it leads to a vicious cycle of a downward spiral. And I'll be using a timeline to talk about specifically what we can do, what a company can do, and more importantly, how to shift left on this so that way you can do it in a day if you do enough preparation. And then also on a individual level, I wanted to talk about what we can do as an individual, regardless of the circumstance. And even if you're in a terrible onboarding experience, you still would be able to come out clean. Okay. And the whole idea here is that we want people to feel well and that they have a individual capability for it. Then I'd like to stop and get some questions. And they gave me a little bit extra time today. So that way I can talk a little bit about what we've experienced in the Mac OS customizations, because it is a very timely topic with the uh, transition over to ZSH instead of Bash and the transition to the M1 chips on my new laptop, which you're likely to get if you're going to a new company today. You'll get a nice little ARM chip that's doesn't even have a fan. And so today, what I'm hoping that we can get out of all of this, the one thing that I hope that you remember from today is just this generalization, that people may forget what was said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I know that this is a technical conference here, but I thought I'd kind of interject a little bit things that's important and that it trumps everything else, overshadows everything else in what we do with our technology. And we may ascribe phrases that sadistic bully since they were kids to purposely inflict emotional trauma. Some trauma still negative triggers negativity and disengagement and take the wind out of our sails. So these exact words are not usually said intentionally during onboarding, but that's often how people feel if we don't treat them well or take the time to figure out how we do a better job of it. Okay. And so let me go through this vicious cycle that I talked about of what we want to avoid. is that, we recruit and interview people, spend a lot of money recruiting, a lot of time interviewing. And when that starts, we make he or she hunt down things alone. And this makes for rework, which means delays and frustrations, and delay people blamed as incompetent, regardless of the cause. So people who can't do their jobs soon will quit or get fired. And that's a terrible thing. And so the question is, what is the root cause of the vicious cycle? What is it that was is gets us going to this vicious cycle of getting another person going through the entire cycle through again? It's really out of fear. The fear of that's created by a bureaucracy or a culture in this bureaucracy. So my question is, what can we do to make people feel better? And that's what my contribution hopefully is today. What we want people to feel is fearlessness, is that they can do anything, right? I mean, that's ultimately what makes a extraordinary organization or extraordinary team to work with, is that they can run in. And that's the reason why we would watch these superheroes because they're fearless. And we admire that. And I want to be part of the superhero team, and that's the fearlessness. So that in order to achieve that, we need a culture of blamelessness. And there's been a lot of literature that has been set up here. I won't get into it today, but really it's Google blameless, and you can see the surveys that's been done. And both Microsoft and Google analyzed their top teams, and they figured out that the one thing that all of them have in common is this idea of a psychological safety in their team. So how do we create that in a onboarding process? Is that we all need to know like who does what and how, but the approach to that requires lists, videos, having a buddy to answer random questions. That those three things lead to less toil, less second guessing, and that means there's a higher speed of execution of agility. And the idea of training and automation will get us to this fearlessness because people are excited to go to work. And then now when we do a recruiting and interviewing, it would be for more people and rather than just replacements. Okay. So now let's take a look at a timeline of what I mean in terms of training and automation and getting to the speed of agility and how we do this. Now let's look at each phase of onboarding along a timeline. Even before a candidate is first contacted by a recruiter or a salesperson, social media enables anyone to know about the reputation of the organization in Glassdoor or postings on Yelp, etc. Interactions with each candidate adds to that reputation. And as people progress through interviews and offers and acceptance and so forth, many companies squander that opportunity to build goodwill and excitement. And those are golden opportunities to inform people of what is good about the organization. So during interviews, provide information along with offer, provide more information. And between acceptance and starting, provide them even more information so they're more likely to show up when they come to the first day. Right? I mean, we've seen, right? A lot of people they don't show up even after they accept. And a lot of it has to do with some of that reputation. But I think that if you engage them all the way through, give them information, and have them look at your videos instead of doom scrolling and binging on Netflix. So we want to shift left this information. And that's really is the secret for the one day, is that first day is a golden opportunity when they first start. And we want to have as much of that information that they go through before they start, rather than overloading them with all kinds of extraneous stuff that they don't need to that they could be worked on earlier, right? And so that's called shift left, and there's shift left with security, there's shift left with, any number of processes. And so I'm proposing that you do a shift left of information about your company in there. So one of the things that you could do is that you can, even after a person accepts and within that 2 or 3 weeks, have them meet with a lot of other people. And even if they don't have time, these other people don't have time, put a video of them, somebody interviewing them, and send that to the new person. So that way they've got something to do. Again, you want to give them an opportunity instead of Netflix, right? and it's to make sure that they only have one chance to make a first impression, right? And impressions lead to judgments about a person's capability and timing of eventual offboarding on there, and we don't want to have negative experiences on that by spreading out the situation. So we increase the chance of capable people staying in the organization. The way to do that, I think, is to send out third-party surveys after every single point in the situation. So that way, you would have a feedback of what's going on. So that way, if somebody doesn't show up, you wouldn't perhaps know that ahead of time, right? Because they don't answer your survey. And then if they don't answer your survey, maybe you can follow up and say, hey, everything doing okay. So that way you've got a pulse of what's going on in the heads of the people on there. So that way you can adjust in your whole shift left capability. Then the idea here is that the more people that someone meets during interviews, the more avenues are available to resolve issues during onboarding. And introductions can start even before the first day uh, on here. So the idea here is that when people work, you can get Facebook and Reddit, and they would comment, and you can invite them to comment positive situations because they're more excited probably during before the session. The question is that really comes up a lot is that these companies ghost these employees or the potential employees. They just don't even get back to them. And that seems to me as a kind of a sore point among a lot of people. So try not to ghost and try to use calendars and don't just send people a link with a meeting time and a Zoom link. That's just disastrous because you've got to figure out a way of automatically adjusting for time zones and daylight savings and so forth and different times that people are meeting. So, use that calendar a lot. So that way people don't, people show up and not because they will miss, adjusting for the time zone. Provide links in there as soon as you can. And then highlight the unique advantages that your company has over other people and other ones. And again, introductions. And the first day, this is really a key that when they come up, you would have the ideal is to have a laptop fully loaded with tools rather than having that person hunting down each individual one. Oh, how do I install Zoom? How do I get a Salesforce? How do I get into, I understand what I'm saying. It's just that you don't want people hunting around trying to figure out, oh, do I go to Okta? Do I go to Confluence and all that? It is a maddening situation. So why can't we just get a laptop fully loaded with all the tools and they can start, right? And immediately with all the permissions already set up on there rather than making them hunt through. This right here is the one. And I'll give some examples of how we can make that after the initial first set of presentations here. Having a buddy, a single point of contact to ask questions is really a crucial aspect. So that way somebody doesn't feel like they're just hanging out flapping in the wind, right? Shadowing with people, arrange those interviews with people after they start, even before they start, have those interviews scheduled already. So that way they are shadowing people, doing pair programming on the second day after they get their laptop on there. So that is really the big keys to getting it working. Okay. Now the challenge to customization of training and tooling is to do it for specific jobs because you're going to have variations that each person, and which is why you need kind of a system to do this. The challenges and concerns of each person, I think it's important for you to realize. So when you're actually interviewing, when you're providing information to various people, like for example, like a CEO type person, a CIO or any of the CXOs, you want to talk about profitability and competitors and risk and public relations and things. So I won't go into any detail in any one of these, but a new person, you want that person to have the perspective of every one of these kinds of people. And rather than just saying, okay, this is your little job and you just kind of stay in your lane, I think that you'll get a much more valuable employee by covering this information as if they were the CEO, as if they were the security chief. So that way they can participate, they can have contributions. And again, a lot of the advantages of hiring a new person is that perspective, the new perspective that they can fit, that they can bring to the table. And you'll miss all that if you do not cover all these different aspects that a new person would take a look at. And just bringing up these topics really would be very helpful because it brings up issues and brings up ideas they may never have thought of. Right? The dilemma is, how do we fit all this messaging in? Okay. And the and also the idea is that in that messaging, we want people to feel that they're noticed, that they're wanted, that they're protected and cared for, and accepted, included. And I can go on, right? But again, the key is that we want them to feel fearless. And that's really the survey question that you would have, I think, is to whether your onboarding system has worked. This is that they are more fearless or less fearless when they're coming into the new organization, right? Because that's really what they do. So in the brand, when you're talking about a brand of a company, it's really about these feelings that you want to associate. When you go into a five-star restaurant, that's what they try to do. And so I try, with my colleagues, is to look at myself as providing a five-star service, in a luxury hotel. So that way I can anticipate their needs rather than just hanging around and just waiting for things to happen to me or questions to come to me on there. So, we want to be proactive about it, regardless of this. So what can we do if we want to, offer a five-star service to our organization? Okay, energetically. Here are some ideas that I have to be happy and effective anywhere. What you can do, but you can manage expectations, right? And then you can do things like share a document of who does what. And you just take he says, okay, here are my notes of what I know so far. And if you show that to someone, they can say, oh, yeah, you've missed this and you missed that. But you would miss the opportunity to identify gaps if you don't share that document. Congratulate other people. And that way you can make a contact on there. You can clarify by saying, okay, if information is lacking, hey, I know how to make a video. I can help you with that. So that way everybody can get coming after me would be able to work with that. And that's how partly you can solve that dilemma of how do you get everything in. Automate these calendar selections and appointments. Build from strength. So that way you can work on your primary strength that you would have and focus on that. So that way, you're not wasting time trying to compete in a negative situation, right? And this pre-scheduling time is really important. You need to have a one-on-one time with your managers and your colleagues. So that way you can have an opportunity to say, hey, during this last week there, what did you notice? Is there anything that you heard from other people about me? And what do you think I can do to improve, to help out more, right? That one-on-one time is really a key, I think, to productivity, because you can air out issues that somebody may have. You give them a one-on-one opportunity to say, hey, the way that you said that to me, I didn't really appreciate it. They will not say that on a group level, probably, but if you have a one-on-one time, it's a much more trustworthy kind of timing, okay, environment to air out grievances. Forecasting is a huge issue. If you want to get, caring for other people, part of it is seeing ahead of time, what can you do to anticipate needs, right? And to see scenarios. And a lot of times companies don't cover that as much as I think they should in order to capture the market, because you have to do a lot of preparation in order to do well in the future. Scheduling time again. Asking for invites into, where can I, what Slack channels do I need to look at? What Boxed or Google Drive folders should I really have been looking at? and volunteer, plan for fun activities, and go for parties, plan parties. And so if you find somebody else who's already doing it, go join them and help them. And certainly I think the key is, when you first start, like I went to LinkedIn, look for the people and say, hey, I'm new here and glad to be working with you, and I look forward to working with you. And you can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on a Slack direct messages, and email. A lot of it depends on kind of like the culture of the organization, of which way you want to do this. And then again, making appointments. So those are really the keys. Make appointments, look at things ahead of time, get yourself involved, and share. Is really the what makes it more, what's going to make you effective and what makes you happy. Okay. Now let's look at also some additional information. Now I mentioned LinkedIn. You can go ahead and connect with me there. And the next section of my talk is going to be about what I've discovered while onboarding people on Mac laptops, especially M1 ARM chips on those new laptops. So let me stop for a second here and see if there's any questions that have been gathered so much and before I get on. So anything I should mention here?
So yeah, that's a good call to action there. I love how you split up your talk, by the way. That's really clever. Yeah, if anyone has any questions on what Wilson has covered so far, please drop them in the channel right now. I don't actually have much any questions for you.
Okay.
The only thing for me personally is my neck actually hurts from nodding so much. I've just been the whole time. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what we should be hearing. I really related to a lot of what you've already said, based on my experience of joining at Gitpod, psychological safety, having everything organized for me so I feel less overwhelmed, and meeting a lot of my future colleagues through connecting with them on LinkedIn and on Twitter and things. And it definitely helped me onboard faster, and I felt fearless very quickly, and I felt like I integrated quickly. I don't think I onboarded in a day, but still, it definitely really resonated with me, and I think as well it shows how important it is to think of developers and other people joining your company as human beings, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
Um, but but yeah, thank you so much for that. I was going to say, if you have any more questions for Wilson, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to get off stage now, and then I'll let you go move on with your Mac OS customizations.
All right, super. Now I've organized the situation with startup and preferences, and that's typically how I kind of go and set up a new laptop. The first one is this. JamF is the company that is really, I think that they're the only game in town for starting up a new laptop on Macs, and they have a management process in place for corporations or enterprises to auto deploy patches, which is really important in today's world. It's that they will push um, patches, onto your laptop, so that way you're always closest. And the other thing is that the backups. The first thing I do on a backup is I would plug in a USB drive and go in a time machine, so that way I have a baseline for doing a restore in case I mess up the whole situation there while during my configuration. And initially, you want to upgrade the OS and the Apple apps, and I'll talk a little bit more about that because there are many items on the Mac that are horrendously slow and horrendously insecure because they are old. And so there are a number of things that you could do to upgrade, even like Ruby, Bash, they on the version 3, and even ZHS itself, you ought to be upgrading. And the plan really should be that you should have the latest version of everything, on your laptop, because the issue is with security. It used to be that people were, well, I'll wait for a little bit to see whether things are working, because sometimes it would break. A new version would break things. But my suggestion in today's hostile environment is to, upgrade as soon as you can for the security, if nothing else. And then also a lot of people feel that they can need to, protect their Wi-Fi with firewalls, especially if you're going sitting around with a, sitting around with, um, at Walmart or or Starbucks Wi-Fi, any public situation, you want to be able to, use a VPN if possible, and those aren't very expensive. But a lot of systems, they have set it up so that way you don't really need a VPN from that standpoint because they would do encryption all the way through within the application itself. There are a number of things called dot files that I've incorporated into this Max setup that I showed you that you can use. I'll be showing you. Um, and then the idea here is the dock and top menu defaults. I'll be showing you a little bit about that. And the Finder has some changes that you can do that a lot of people would find helpful, but they don't do it because they just didn't know about it. So I'm hoping that I can show you a little bit today of some of these tricks that you might be want to do. The Slack, Okta a lot of times is used by large companies to install stuff, but they also have a separate ticketing system for you to request things because Okta basically just only handles the permissions side. It doesn't really handle the requesting side. So there usually is a separate application that's necessary in order to request permissions to Slack or Learning and all of these other ones that you have to do. There are a number of browser add-ins that you can do that provide a lot of convenience, but I think recently I've cut them back quite a bit where I'm only doing like a small handful of very trusted situations. Then that I'm very because it's already happened where you would have a add-on for a browser and you would install it and then they say, oh yeah, this is a security risk, and it becomes an issue. So again, I'm trying to work with the least number of add-ons that I possibly can and turn them off or even actually delete them if I'm not using them. The other thing with emails is, I write a signature, especially in GitHub, or that, I would use a GCP encryption. So that way there's a signature that would protect the system by verifying that I am who I say I am. Okay. And then also too, I have as part of that um, bash file or the ZHH file I've created. So that way it would create environments locally and in the cloud in one command. So that way, we would make use of improvements along the way. So I'll show you a little bit about that. Okay. So anyway, so that's the plan. And let me just start out by saying that with Jamf to auto deploy, they would start with the Touch ID, so that way your email would be associated with your account, and then they would set up file vault to encrypt your disk. So that way, if somebody picking up your disk, they can't just take off the hard drive and be able to work with it if you've got that encrypted. Accessibility and options and Siri options that you want to do. A lot of times when you start off with a JAMF deployed, you would have to select a username, a division, your department as a manual process, so that way they know, who that is. And then you would set up Wi-Fi and Office 365 and Google. So the idea here, the first one, is that you would go into the system preferences. There are a number of, like here, there are a number of what they call dot files that are out there, which will set these automatically in a script and not so you don't have to do that manually. So for example, you can find out these you just go into terminal and put this command in, defaults read, and it will send out a file of the different settings that's already setting on there. So I want to do this first. just to see what the defaults are. So that way, as you make changes, you can see, later creating the same one again, you can find out, what's going on, what changes you've made. So that way you can have a fallback. The ones that I wanted to let you know about is the general items here. A lot of people get into that, the trackpad and mouse pad, especially if you're installing a monitor, a large monitor, you would need to change the tracking and the mouse speed. So that way you're not like, click and drag just to get to one side of the screen to the other. I usually set it at the highest sensitivity level, so that with one flick of my wrist, that I can go to the one end to the other. Okay, and a lot of people like to change the desktop and screensavers, as well. Now, the key, I think, to productivity a lot of times is that you would have these items on the board so you can take a look at these. But when I do videos, like for example, you can see here, I don't have a bar on the top here all the time. You can hide it. And that's the way to do it in the Docker and menu bar. And so you can have, Bluetooth to set that up. So that way you can come in here and set up the Wi-Fi and like the VPN. You can get to the time machine of the backups. And there are, in the dock and menu bar, you can set whether certain features show up on this. Like for example, this keyboard brighter signal on here, you can set it or remove it from that menu bar. So that way, if you don't need it, or if you feel better about reaching it using your keyboard rather than mousing, would be a good thing. Now, by the way, one of the key differences between a very productive developer versus one that's just starting is the use of the mouse. Developers, I find, some of them, they would go to extreme lengths to save, ability to stay on the keyboard. They would use like Vim or NeoVim, where you don't have to use the mouse at all in your ones. And so a lot of people, they would learn these keyboard shortcuts like this. Function Control F8 will get you to the top anytime. So that way, you're not taking your mouse and having to run it through, because that's takes extra time to think about it, and it takes attention away from what you're trying to do. Okay, so that is really a key suggestion that you have, is learn these keys and don't be intimidated by the fact that there's 3 of them, because you'll figure it out. If you use it enough, then you'll remember it and you'll amaze your friends. Okay. To start with, you can go into the mouse. And by the way, when you click on this guy, you would go from one system preference menu to another based on this. And if you have a terminal, then you can change your scale using this as well. Then you can do the tracking maximum speed of 5.0 would get you here, or you can do the slider, or you can put this inside a script. And the nice thing about this is that if you put this inside a script, if the next time you get a laptop, it'll also show up, right? You can just run it, and you will be setting it up completely the same. And whatever you do on your mouse, you probably want to do also on your trackpad, as well. There's a number of these ones in here that it's the ones that I really want to put the code in my Mac setup script, is the ones that would override the defaults that they have. And so I don't want to go to a dot file and just put everything in that file to automate. Well, I would only pick the ones that would override the defaults and leave everything the way it is. Okay, like such as the tracking speed. Here are some suggestions for you to have on this. You can have a icon size. So for example, on the icons, you can do it for smallish ones, and this is the command to do that. And by the way, I'll send you this whole file on here when you to make it easier for you. You can work with it yourself, so that way you're just copying it. On the other one is the defaults is having a dark. I like the dark background because I wear glasses, and when I do a presentation, it will not reflect off my glasses as much. Okay, and also too in the Finder preferences, it's really important for you to show hidden files, so that way you can work with that. Now there is a command, a key that you can use to in a Finder be able to reveal hidden files. I think that's Shift Command period. So look that up, and along with these other ones that you can do, very quickly. Right, now here's the architecture of my application that I wrote or the setups that I have. Now, as you know, bash profile, is the name that the operating system looks for, to do a boot up, and that would define the path of where executables are found, and you can also create aliases to create your own keyboard aliases on here. You can also source another bash RC, which is really the interactive, because there's two different kinds of startup when you start up a terminal. One is that the login that automatically goes to, and then when you in the terminal and you start a new interactive terminal, it would look at the bash RC first, right? And there you define a thing called a PS1. And what that does is that defines through various special characters that you put in here of what your terminal prompt looks like. And so here's um, my whole structure that I have now been experimenting with over time to install all of this. And there's a file that I've created called the ZHS file just to experiment with how to set up the environment. So what I did was I created as a alias file to do my keyboard. I created a file called the Mac setup that would implement this or execute this alias, and then I switched over to using this Mac setup ZHH. I would switch over to the new default ZHH by having this defining the environment, just like the equivalent of bash profile, and so all of that is in there that I recommend that you take a look at, so that way you can work with it. Right now, here's an example of my what this looks like. Again, I don't have the time to mess with this, but I did put various comments about why what the folders that you need in order to have it, and what kind of programs are in here, and each one of these ones in here. And I've got kind of helpful hints in there that with the Linux and with Mac, you use colons, and semicolons would break the whole system there. And if you go back between Macs and Linux and and all that, it's a tough thing. And I also put in there, where I don't see very often, this applications uh, folder, where that allows you to just type in a name of the program that's application, and then it will start it up from your laptop, from your terminal. Again, you can take a look through this whole, and I invite comments from you on this. And then I have on here these Mac environment variables that you set, that's customized to you, so that way you could just with several characters you can work with. The other one is the Mac setup. This is the program that I wrote, the shell script that I wrote, so that way you could have flags and be able to create, like for example, when one command here would be to install brew, and along with Golang or Ruby or whatever else, all I need to do is just to type these things. Well, this is after I do a chmod in here, and then that way I just write these three things, and it will install everything that I need to do the work for that particular team. And so if the team makes use of this, then they don't have to worry that, oh yeah, you're missing this program or that program in order to work with us quickly. And this is really the secret sauce that I have for you in terms of how to make this work. Now, you don't have to use my example. You can create your own. But the idea is that you have a script that you can run, which allows new people to update their laptops, or actually, get better yet, give this to the people who set up your laptop. They run through this for your team, and then that way they'll have everything installed when you get that laptop. Okay. Um, Now, there are a number of these utilities that you would get. Like I would also use the Xcode, and part of this what I do here with my MCK setup is this how to install Xcode on there, because there's a couple of different techniques for that. You can get the Xcode app or the CLI version of it, and one doesn't play well with the other. So it's kind of a set of logic that I have in there in order to work with that. So some of the names are kind of a weird, like Visual Studio Code is instead of VS Code. We would have to to work with. Now I use a Firefox browser. Whoops. I use a Firefox browser in addition, because some things, in order to do debugging, you need to create. You go into the application or the website using a different browser, so it doesn't have all of the different history in it. It's much easier for me to go into a different browser than it is to clear out all of my cookies on there. Also, the free download manager is helpful sometimes on this, and you would also have, I would imagine, so if depending on who you work with, I have all these preloaded, so that way I can just jump in rather than being late to a meeting because I'm trying to install everything right before. So these are some of the standard stuff that I have. I also have different PyCharm, different editors in here, because some editors are better for some things than others. Sublime Text, for example, comes up fastest than anybody, but there's a kind of a nagware that is in there that you have to get. And also too, depending on the team I work with, I would either use Postman or Insomnia to work with to beta test, I guess, the APIs calls on there. And then always Docker. And if you're doing media, then you've got, OBS, Camtasia, or Adobe on there. So anyway, so those are kind of the major aspects that I have on here. You can do, sync and the emails. I also have a Calendary for scheduling. There is some concern about the security of those as well on there. So to summarize this whole presentation here is that if you look at this process, keep spreading your stories as many channels, so that way people have a good idea about you before they come in. So that way you have a basis for discussion, and proactively address potential issues with surveys. Don't ghost anyone. Automate the scheduling, automate the calendar, meet the whole team if you can, you even support people. So that way you feel like you know who to go to, right? And that you're not lost. And you detail the trainings. It says, okay, here's all the things that you can take a look at. Give a whole list. And what I do is I give people, as part of the laptops, a set of browser links that you have, like when you have like a bookmarks, this entire set of bookmarks I've collected. I install it on their system. They can delete it if they want to change it around, but at least they don't have to go to every single ones and have to take notes and keep up a separate file. All of the links to various trainings and all the different websites would be in those bookmarks. And then during this training, I would refer to those bookmarks rather than saying, okay, hey, you've got to memorize all of this. Right? And also too, is this that notice that, FaceTime and Zoom is oftentimes more valuable than emails that you would have people do. Scheduling time, I mentioned that, videos, document, and, install as much as you can. And then you want to, as a company, as a team, you want to have people send direct messages from as many people as you can to welcome that person, so that way that person feels included. Okay, and also too is a buddy would check in specifically after the first hour, after the first day, after the first week, at the end of the month, and every quarter. So that way there's a cadence of making sure that your people don't disappear right on there. So anyway, so that's what I've got, and it's just the idea of acting all of this at the earliest possible time. Okay, so let me turn this back onto you, and if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to talk.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Wilson. Do we have any questions from the audience? Now is your chance to ask Wilson live. Otherwise, I actually had a question that popped up, because I think most of what you discussed was I don't know, I sort of related to it in my other jobs as well with onboarding in person. But there's a common theme in the conference, especially today. We've talked about remote a lot and remote cultures and remote development. What's one thing that you would say to like teams who are fully remote, and what can they do to help with that onboarding process? Is it going to be, is it different to in person? And yeah, what can people do to support new people joining the company remotely?
Yeah, I think that one-on-one on Zoom is really important, and having Slack, that the communication, having a team Slack of your small team, and so that way you can just broadcast. Okay, this is this. So that way you could kind of see what people are doing, and like remember the architecture of offices has been, even still is, this open plan. Why do they do it that way? So that way people can listen in and kind of stay in touch of what's going on. And instead of that, you would have a Slack channel for the team. That's how you can eavesdrop. So I would highly recommend a Slack channel for just your team. And then also you have a department, maybe too much, right, of constant jabber going on. But each product should have its own Slack channel. Each team should have its own Slack channel, a public one and a one for the overall company would be a good. But I think the key is just engagement and survey is really the key to the whole situation, because you have to replace this water cooler effect that you would have in there. So the idea here is that you would have a friendship with
Mhm.
your team, and if you don't feel that you really could be as close friends as you were with the regular office, then you've done something wrong, or you need to do something better, right? To up
Yeah.
the game. Is and parties. There's one also too, is like one team I had, they had like every Friday during lunch, everybody would get on Zoom and have lunch together. And then the rule is not to talk anything about work, but just about, individual and what their, ideas are.
Yeah, yeah, and I would also add to that because I've helped out with a bit of onboarding at Gitpod, which is a fully remote company, and I think one thing that we do really well is we have a bot on Slack that if you opt in, you automatically get paired with someone in the company to have a coffee chat, and that's strictly no work talk, so it still keeps that water cooler chat going remotely as well. So and I think that helps a lot. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Wilson. We've got a question here from the audience. Does shift left create conflicts between a person's old job and new job commitments?
Yeah, that's true. It could be, but you don't have to do it during the day, right? I mean, it's just well, that's the reason why I say, just look at those new things instead of binge on Netflix or doom scrolling. And yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying do work before you start, but really is to take a look at the videos and take a look at the documents that you have, so that way you'll be prepared and feel better about joining an organization. The point is, I think, is that you offer the information. It doesn't mean everybody has to read it. I think the more that you offer, the more included people will feel, which is really the objective, really more than,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's more really, you think about it. I mean, the objective is more that people feel like they're included, that they're important, that they're getting information. It's That's really the objective, than the actual fact that they know some trivia, which is because once you have that feeling, you have wind in your sails and motivation to get that other additional information.
Yeah, that's so true. Um, we've got another question here from the audience. There are dot files to tweak your terminal commands, colors, etc. How much would you recommend pulling those files? Is it safe?
Yeah, that's a good question, because individual commands that I showed you, that changes over time. That it may work for back in Catalina, but it doesn't work with Monterey for today. So yeah, you have to be careful about that. I don't think there's enough people writing about it, but in my file that I showed you on my GitHub, that Mac dash setup, I've put only a few of the ones that are only override the the defaults that I don't like, and the rest of them just leave it. So that way, just don't mess with it unless you want to override defaults.
Yeah. Awesome. And also, I just wanted to add to that actually. It was great listening to you talk through your uh what you would do, because I thought it was only me doing this excessive going through step by step, trying to like automate everything. So the next time I onboard, I don't have to go through everything again. I also have a dot files repo on my GitHub if anyone is curious. I've got several things I automate on there. Although a lot of my development environment is obviously just in the cloud with Gitpod, but still, it's still there when I have a new laptop or whatever.
Yeah.
Amazing. If anyone has any more questions, we do have 2 more minutes. Drop them here. Whilst we're waiting for any more to come through, I wanted to just share some comments from the audience. So listening to all these tips makes me think about formatting my Mac OS to apply every step Wilson is explaining. I also felt like that. I also felt like that because I was like, yeah, I do a lot of this, but there's actually a lot I've missed, and I'm definitely going to come back to this talk and look at them again. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
still a process. But anyway, so Guillermo, especially, connect with me on LinkedIn. I have almost 11,000 people now, so connect with me, and we'll figure out how to blow up your machine.
Well, that's a wonderful way to like a wonderful goal there. Amazing, amazing. And there was another comment I wanted to bring up here. Yeah, I don't have any questions for now, but I really like the proactive approach when onboarding in a new company instead of waiting for people to come to you. Yeah, that's I have to admit that's something that in my first ever tech job, I didn't I was less proactive, and I was just waiting for people to tell me things. But as I switched jobs, I realized that yeah, the more proactive you are, the better experience that you have with onboarding to your new company, and the more successful you'll be. You get closer to feeling fearless and more included as part of that new team. So yeah, incredible.
All right, well,
Yes.
enjoy this. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to next year when we'll cover even more.